evening. This is Luke Martin, and it is another episode of Inside the IWAR. Tonight we have Tom, and we're going to be talking to him. Same thing we talk to everybody about. Also learn a little bit more about him, and at the end of the day, waste a little bit more of your life. So how you doing tonight, Tom?
I'm doing good, Luke. How about yourself, man?
I am doing fabulous. I am about 2 beers in, so I'm doing pretty good.
I'm about the same. I think I might be at 3. So, it'll be a good time. We'll drink a few more as we go.
You always have to be one up on me, don't you, Tom?
It's the story of your life, Luke.
I appreciate that.
All
Thanks.
right.
So first, I want to talk about, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? That sort of thing.
It's the same answer. So I live in a small town in Ohio that no one, even in Ohio, has heard of. It's a small town called Alliance. I tell everybody I'm from Cleveland. I'm not.
Gotcha.
If you're in Ohio, I tell you I'm from the Canton, Akron area, which is not anywhere near Cleveland, but nobody knows where I'm from. I was born there. I was raised there. I still live there. I'll probably die there. It's just, I like it here, and that's where I'm going to stay.
All right, cool, man. So what do you do right now? I need to do some programming. Is that right? Or what do you write code, or what do you do?
Yeah, so I actually run a web design and development company. I've done that I've been in web design and development for, this hurts to say, like 20 years. So I've been doing it since like the mid-90s at some point. And 4 or 5 years ago, I left my job. I used to work for a large marketing agency in Cleveland. And I left and hung my own shingle. So I run my own web design and development company out of Canton, Ohio. Actually sitting in our offices right now because I needed some quiet to record. So
look at you. You're big timing it up. All right. So how did you get into that? Is that something you went to college for, or is that something you've always enjoyed, or how did that work?
No, so I actually went to college for journalism. I have a degree in journalism. So they make you decide what you want to be when you grow up way too young in life. So I came out of high school and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I like to write, so I'm going to go into journalism. That's a horrible idea. If anybody's listening and thinking about that, do not do that. My degree isn't worth the paper it's printed on at this point. But I had been programming computers since I was in like the 3rd grade or something like that. 8, 9, 10 years old, I've been programming. So it was obvious to everyone but me that I should probably go and do, programming. But I went to college for journalism, and I hated it. I pushed my way through it, but I hated it. And in that, I started doing like the digital versions of the student newspaper and the student magazines and things like that. And it just kind of spiraled. And somehow I ended up from there to here.
That's cool. So you had sent me a picture or something of somebody in the military. Were you in the military as well?
No, that was actually a friend of mine. It was somebody I went to school with. That was this is funny, but it's like a spam thing. Like it was a phishing bot that got me. Like I clicked on a link and all of a sudden it sent it to all of my friends. So I actually know the guy in the picture, but I didn't intend to send it to anybody.
Oh, well, that worked out well because I was in the military, so I just figured I would ask.
Yeah, no, it's a good buddy of mine named Matt. He did his time. I know the guy and I know him well, but did not intend to send that to anybody. So
it's fine. I was like, that doesn't look like Tom at all.
It was not me. I am not that fit.
Well, look, man, when you get paid to work out, it's really easy to be fit. Let me tell you that.
Right.
And when you don't have a choice, too, it's kind of.
Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty cool, man. Where'd you go to school at?
I went to Kent State University here in Ohio, home of Mike Mizrachi and Dolph Ziggler. So I went to school at Kent, where they shoot the hippies, that sort of thing. So went there for journalism. They have a pretty highly rated journalism school. Journalism and fashion, actually, is what they're known for. Or at least used to be.
All things that you really ended up doing. That's really good to hear.
Totally, yeah.
That really helped you.
Yeah, especially the fashion part. I haven't not worn jeans and T-shirt in 10 years. So
very well. Gotcha. All right, that's cool, man. So what kind of brought you into your wrestling fandom? I mean, was that something that you grew up with or you got into later, or what was up with that?
No, I've been into it almost as long as I can remember. Like I got into it with my grandmother, actually, when I was a little kid. It would be, on Saturday mornings. That's when all the wrestling was back in the day. And I hated it when I was little because I wanted to watch cartoons, right? I wanted to watch Muppet Babies, and my grandmother's watching, WCW or NWA at the time.
Right.
But, eventually you're around it enough and you get sucked in, and then all of a sudden Andre double crosses Hulk Hogan and you're hooked for life. Pretty much how I ended up with it. That's just what we did together, and watched it from there on until probably 2005. And then I took about a 10-year break on it, maybe about a 12-year break. It just didn't enjoy the product anymore, so I kind of quit watching and somehow got sucked back in around 2000, 15, 14, right around WrestleMania 30. It was right around the debut of the network.
Okay. Yeah, I think definitely the network is nice because it kind of brings in everything that you enjoy and it's much easier to follow. What really brought me back in is I could get free pay-per-views because I was in Japan and they had like Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, so I was able to watch those things. But once they came out with the network, I could follow up and follow with everything. And, I don't want to watch 3 hours of Raw every night. So it's not, but I like how they do it now. So I can definitely see. So you just kind of took a 10-year break. Just what kind of, it just got old after a while or what?
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't really enjoy that product. It was right around the rise of Randy Orton and the start of Evolution. And I don't know, the whole thing just felt stale to me. And I got burned out on it. And then, 10, 12 years later, my buddy calls and goes, hey, WrestleMania 30's tonight. Come on over. And I'm like, all right, I'll go. And then I've been kind of sucked back in ever since.
The WrestleMania is like that pomp and circumstance that I mean, I kind of fell in love with the whole. I got these tapes on the Coliseum, and it was like WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 3. Now, granted, I was born in 1985, so those things had already occurred by the time I was old enough to watch them, but I would just watch them religiously, and then you could watch it on Saturday morning, and it's just that whole era was just so big. And then I got into like the Monday Night Wars, WCW, and Monday Night Raw, and I like that. I kind of fell out once the Attitude Era started, and then I kind of came back in slowly with like CM Punk and stuff like that. So I can see there's a lot of people that had that weird gap, because I think like the late to like the middle of the 2000s was kind of like meh, like they weren't really doing much, and it was kind of getting stale. But I think it's not to say they weren't doing good work, but there wasn't a lot of good. It was more of the same people doing the same things over and over and over again. So
it was. I mean, that was the era of, from what I've read and seen and backtracked on through the network, that was pretty much the era of Orton versus Cena every other pay-per-view for 5 years.
Right.
It sort of seems that way. I came back around WrestleMania 30, and the Shield broke up, like, I think the following pay-per-view. I think they fought Evolution or something at the following pay-per-view, and then they broke up the following night.
Well, that was like shortly after WrestleMania, yeah.
Right. So I have no real nostalgia for the Shield. Like, I've never really known them together because I didn't really watch them. So I don't give a damn. Like, it's like, great, you're back together, never really been together. So I have no nostalgia for it. So that gap actually even affects like how I see the product today.
Like, I came in like right as the Shield was still cool. And then the Shield, the way they dealt the Shield breakup, because they were like so over, and then all of a sudden they broke up. I mean, that was a pretty much a master stroke to have that sort of, breakup. And that was probably the best thing that they did, like freshen up the product. And they brought all these people in. And I think I watched like AJ Styles versus Nakamura. And, they're like, oh, Finn Balor. I'm like, who the fuck is Finn Balor? And then I finally figured out who he was, watched some of his New Japan stuff. So I think that, I don't know what the powers that be, I think maybe Triple H or something, started bringing these guys in. And that kept me with the product, because I was like, oh, I can see all these guys as they come up. And I think, too, with the network and the internet, it's so easy to follow up on people. Whereas back in the day, I didn't know anybody else that liked wrestling. So I didn't really have. Right. But now I can find it on my own. I can YouTube it or whatever. And I think that's a huge plus for them, even though they don't see it that way.
Right. And I think part of what drew me back in is, even though I didn't really watch much wrestling in that 10-year gap, is I dabbled with Ring of Honor. So I was always looking for something, because I always like wrestling when it's more presented as a sport. Mm-hmm. And that early Ring of Honor presentation was, the handshake, let's have a good match. They were standing, so I really dug that. Well, when I come back at WrestleMania 30, there's all these guys that I went and have seen live at Ring of Honor. Daniel Bryan wins the title that night. Claudio Castagnoli, a.k.a. Cesaro, wins the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. So there was like still a connection there with, things I knew. And I was like, oh, hey, these are these guys I really liked. I'm going to give this a shot again.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know. It hasn't necessarily been without its bumps in the roads, but hopefully they're kind of figuring out. Did you watch Survivor Series? Have you caught that yet?
I did. I just watched it a couple of nights ago. It's a good show. I think my problem with the product now is just that the match results don't really matter. Like, I remember that the final score was 4-3, but I couldn't tell you who won what match, and it's not going to affect anything.
Right.
Like, I don't need to know, because, like, in WWE, the matches only exist to support the story. So as long as you can follow the story, the match results don't matter.
Right.
I go back to that. I like it, the presentation of it as a sport, and WWE's taken some of that out. So I appreciate what they do. I think their roster is as talented as probably any that's ever been constructed. Like, the matches are actually good. They just don't matter.
Yeah. Well, I think they're slowly turning away from it. I mean, if you watched where AJ came in and filled in for Finn Balor, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if they paid attention to how much pop that got, but I mean, that made the pay-per-view. Just those two guys getting in the ring together, and they did a good job at Survivor Series, at least building some kind of a little bit of a congruent story. So the matches that happened really, like, they didn't matter, but I cared about them because there was some reason why they would have some sort of conflict, right? And I think too, the big thing was for me was with Brock Lesnar and AJ Styles. I don't know, Brock Lesnar obviously likes AJ Styles because the way that he sold that calf crusher through even after he was done. Granted, you can't have Brock lose there, but at the same time, no one came over weak, and I think they did a good job of keeping everybody strong and really developing them. Even like you said, the matches don't matter, but that story. So everybody that came out of that night, they added something to that story, to their story of that individual wrestler, and I think that was the hallmark of it. And they fed the fans. Like when Finn came in and they wanted Nakamura in, guess who came in? Nakamura. So it was nice to see that they were paying service to the fans, and if they can continue to do that, I think it'll be better overall. And I really like how they're slowly like putting people to, not necessarily part time, but like even like Randy Orton and John Cena. Like it was
Right.
neat that they were there because you don't see them very often. And I like Randy Orton, but if you put him in front of me every time, he gets old. But if you bring him
Right.
in every once in a while to do an RKO on somebody, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I would agree with you, but my counterpoint to that would be, sure, they gave us, 3 minutes of Balor versus Nakamura, and we all loved it. But at the end of the night, we're all watching Triple H pedigree Shane for the 15th time. So it all ends up back in that same place with sort of the same storylines. And now we're probably heading back towards an Authority, Kurt Angle Triple H sort of thing for Rumble to Mania corridor somewhere in there. So I like everybody. I wish the people I liked got more of a push, but
Right.
they gotta sell tickets.
Yeah,
So
that's true. And I mean, I did like how like Braun, they had Braun eliminate basically like everyone except for Shane, and he came out and made he basically crushed Triple H. And for whatever bad things you want to say about Triple H throughout his career, he really does a good job now of putting guys over. Like he made
sure.
Braun Strowman already looked like a threat, and then they had a whole team like put him through a table, and then he came out and just like destroyed Triple H. So that was good. The women's match where they actually had like the Survivor Series match, that made everybody women look good because it wasn't just like
Right.
a 5 women battle royal for nothing. It was like a neat little showcase, and they protected the people they need to protect. Nia Jax got put out by countout. Uh,
Right.
Asuka won it and she defeated it, so it looked good. And I think they made everybody look better. But like you said, yeah, I don't know. They're in a transition mode, but if they can continue doing what they're doing, like putting some of the older guys to the side and allowing some of the younger guys to spotlight, that's good. I don't really care about a Kurt Angle Triple H match, but at the same time, it could be worse. We could be seeing like Triple H versus like Rando number 3 and have him beat him at WrestleMania. Like we don't need to see Triple H defeat AJ Styles at WrestleMania or something stupid. So at least they're putting two legends together as opposed to putting a legend over somebody new. So that's nice.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it would be legend versus legend, akin to Triple H versus Sting a few years back. The problem is that they have all these part timers that come in for Mania, so it doesn't give spots to the guys that you really like a Nakamura or a Styles. I mean, they get their spots now because they've earned them, but
Right.
those part timers really hog up the headlining roles. I mean, we had Undertaker and Lesnar versus Goldberg and Triple H match last year, and like those headlining spots are taken up. So it's like they want to go that way, but they don't really want to commit to it.
Right.
So that's a little bit frustrating, but eventually Father Time wins, right? Like these
Right.
guys can't do it forever. So, at some point they have to flip the switch.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, I think they're becoming a little bit more self-aware because they reference things. They reference the fact that Joe and Cena came up together, and that's why that was special, or the fact that Nakamura and Finn came up in Japan, and they're both IWGP champs, and they mentioned that, and the fact they're letting Jericho go wrestle Omega in Japan. I think hopefully somewhere logic is coming into their brain that, hey, if we're the best or the number one promotion in the world, we need to let our guys go and wrestle in some of these other promotions because it just shows what we can bring to the table. And so even if Jericho goes and loses to Omega or whatever, that's fine, because at least we show that, Jericho can still put on a great match or what have you. And it just people are like, yeah, that, WWE isn't, completely lost in the sauce when it comes to a New Japan or a Ring of Honor. They still have workers that can go. And I think if they try to isolate themselves too much, there's just too much exposure for those other brands. And then they look like they're afraid to put their guys out there, even though we know it's like, whatever, it's not real. But at the same time, if you're, that'd be like if they allowed like professional football players to play in college, but they wouldn't let them do it because they were afraid. It'd be stupid, right? If they want to go and play a game in Europe or whatever, sure, let them go for one game and show off. So I don't know. Hopefully there's a switch, and I think hopefully Triple H is behind that because he seems to have a good head, believe it or not, which is kind of shocking. But he's brought a lot of those guys in, and he does a good job of trying to get them in good places. But
and if you look at the NXT product, it really seems to have its finger on the pulse of what its fans want. It's not as good as it was, a year or two ago, because a lot of those guys have been brought up to the main roster, so they've been depleted a little bit. But by and large, they have their finger on the pulse of what their fan base wants, and they kind of give it to them. So, I mean, that War Games match last weekend was phenomenal. Like, it was, it was a little spotty, but it was entertaining as all hell. So,
right. And I think hopefully they continue to do those things. And the biggest problem they have now is they just have too many guys that could be a top guy anywhere else in the same system. So it's hard to balance those guys. Like, how do you have Finn Balor, AJ Styles, Brock Lesnar, Shinsuke Nakamura, you have all these guys. So what do you do with them, and how do you keep them engaged, and how do you keep them, it's hard to do some of those things. But with like Cody, that you can't call them Rhodes. I think they are starting to realize that they're not the only game in town, especially with like Young Bucks and Omega. Like, Young Bucks have merchandise in Hot Topic, and they're rolling in money. A pretty good time to be an independent worker. And with the, Pro Tees, or not yet, like the store that they have, they can sell their own merch, and they don't need necessarily a machine anymore to get out there and get visible. People will buy it because I can watch a one shot on YouTube and go buy a T-shirt at the local mall. So
yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, they're starting to realize that they have some competition. I mean, New Japan is picking up, steam with their service, and ROH is looking to get into the streaming game. So there's actually, there's this conception that WWE is the only game in town because there is no WCW and no Power, but really you have more options as a wrestling fan to follow any product you want, more than you have ever had in the past. So
yeah, and I think too, like, they need to be really worried about New Japan, because New Japan has nothing to lose. If they have 10 fans in America, they're already ahead of the game, whereas WWE can't compete with New Japan in Japan. Like, they can have a couple of shows that'll sell well, but they can't bring the WWE network doesn't have as many subscribers as New Japan's streaming service does in the States. So they need to understand that even though New Japan gives very little care about what they do in America, that's better for them, because they don't try to compete with WWE because they don't need to. Yeah. So that's definitely a step in the right direction, I think, for everybody. And even if it's not direct competition, it's enough competition to where they have an emphasis on putting together solid matches, as opposed to just throwing in, the BS that they've been thrown to. And this was, I would say, the Survivor Series was the first pay-per-view of the year where it looked like they kind of realized, like, hey, we can't just call this one in. And I think the thing is funny is the WWE, the one feather in the cap that they do have over New Japan is they have solid women workers. And I think that the more that they continue to let them grow and do what the men are doing, the more successful they're going to be, because a lot of those women, they can put on really, really good matches. And as the physicality increases, which they seem to continue to do, and the psychology continues to stay good, that's going to continue to draw more fans, because it's no longer like, there's some female matches that I really enjoyed. That Survivor Series match. It looked good. It was
Mm-hmm.
fun. It was interesting. So I think that if they can continue to grow that, they're leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of the other promotions because they just have the ability to have a large female roster and do a lot with them, where the other, New Japan and Ring of Honor don't have that ability because they just don't have the money to invest it because they have to get the most out of every show they do. Or WWE doesn't necessarily have to do that.
Yeah, I'd love to see the women get more of a subplot though. Like everything revolves around the title, or it doesn't exist. Now,
Right.
there were some steps this week that look like maybe that's going to change a little bit, but we'll see how that shakes out. But it's really you're in the title mix or you're kind of off TV. I don't know if the answer is to give them like the equivalent of like a 205 Live, which I don't know. I've never watched an episode of 205 Live, so that probably wouldn't affect anything for me.
Right.
But they just don't give them room to breathe. But it's nice to see women who as compared to the Attitude Era, where they were just, basically eye candy and
Right.
couldn't wrestle worth a damn. Like, I mean, these are legitimate athletes that can actually put on a very compelling match. So that's great to see.
Right. And I don't know. I like what they do with Asuka. They continue to protect her. They continue to play up the fact that she hasn't lost. So when she does lose, it's going to be a big deal if they can continue to book it right. And I could see, they could put on a Nia Jax Asuka match would be great because you have this like immovable mountain against this unrelenting force. And I mean, that would be a good show to see. I don't know. We'll have to see where it goes from here because they're known for like giving you hope and then completely crushing your dreams because Asuka loses like a one shot to like rando number 2 on Raw for something stupid.
Right.
And there's she doesn't have any business of ever letting anybody go over her at this point.
Right. Or in the year of our Lord 2017, Finn Balor jobs to Kane 2 or 3 weeks in a row. But but it's great that some of the women are actually have characters. Like Alexa Bliss is, in my mind, a top 3 heel in the company. Like she's as good as anyone in terms of being a heel. I mean, to me, it goes like the Miz is the best heel in the business right now, and Alexa Bliss is maybe number 2.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, and she just the way she plays it up, like even the Charlotte match, she's yelling at the ref, and the psychology in that match, for whatever reason, anytime Charlotte has a match, people will focus on a limb or something that prevents her from doing her figure 8. Like it was the ribs with Alexa Bliss, it's been the legs before, and she pushes through. So it makes her look strong, but it also makes her opponent look smart, which is sometimes the men don't do at all. And it's just a spot fest. So I think that that's pretty cool that whoever is booking those matches, and I've heard from Juan, he was talking about Arn is back there doing a lot of that and taking care of Charlotte, which may be the case. But if he is, thank God, because he's really doing a good job of building great matches around her, whether she wins or she loses. Right. And if she does lose, so.
And the other night they took a really good job. I mean, Alexa Bliss lost to Charlotte, but she came out looking really strong in that process.
Right.
I thought that was actually probably my favorite match on the show.
Yeah.
And part of that's because I would watch Alexa Bliss read the phone book. She's gorgeous, but I mean, she's very good. So that was a compelling match. And in my mind, other than maybe Brock and AJ, that was probably the best match on the show.
Yeah, I would say that having AJ and Brock go with the way they did and have AJ, get so close. I mean, I think it made everybody look better. And that, I've heard they've said a lot of things about Brock. Obviously, I don't know jack about wrestling, but you don't often see him hurt by anybody. But the fact that he was limping out of the ring and he took some time to get back there and stuff really showed that he maybe has a little bit more respect for AJ Styles, which again, AJ Styles has a stellar reputation. Pretty much, like I've never heard anybody say anything bad about AJ Styles. I think that having him in that company, he's a good worker. He's a great, and anytime he comes out, people enjoy it. So I think that he's a huge land for them because anytime he's in the match, it's going to be a great match. It doesn't matter if he's fighting, Fred the wrestling dog. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. So that's a good deal. So hopefully the product continues, at least with the WWE, continues that way. With Japan, I mean, they put on stellar matches. And like you said, New Japan is where you're going to find that more sport feel. And that's just Japan in general. They have a little bit more respect for things. And I think that, you can watch Japanese match. They're sitting there quietly. They're clapping, cheering when things, so but the way that's styled, that it's just crisp. they're athletes over there, and I think the more that they continue to deliver that product, it gives you an alternative to the kind of showmanship of the WWE. So
right. So earlier this summer, right around G1, actually Jake Joyce turned me on to New Japan. So he got me hooked onto it, and we spend a lot of time talking about that, and I've been enjoying that far more than the WWE product. Again, because of that more of a sport-like presentation, as well as the match quality is generally phenomenal. But again, I say WWE, like the stories or the matches exist to support the stories.
Right.
Whereas in New Japan, there's just enough story to get to the match. And it's all about the competition. Like there's very little, this guy turned on that guy. I mean, there's some of that, but it's just like, let's just tell a surface level story to get to the ring, and then let's all pretend to beat each other up, and like that's what wrestling is at its core to me. So
right. Well, we don't talk about Jake Joyce on this program because we have some heat. He's been dodging me for a while, and he didn't come and visit me when he was here in town. So
yeah, he feels a little guilty about that, I think. Probably not.
I mean, he should feel guilty.
Should.
It should rack him every day. I mean, there should be some tears flowing. But we'll see if he ever comes on the program. But he's elusive. He's that guy.
Yeah, so. He's hard to reach sometimes. No, but he turned me on to New Japan, so he's got me. Big fan of New Japan. I hate when my phone I get a notification when New Japan hits every month when like the billing cycle hits, and it's always in yen. But I'm not prepared for it being in yen. So every month, like I get this notification, it looks like it says you spent $999 on PayPal. And I'm like, what the hell did I just buy? Right? Like it freaks me out every month. So I have Jake to thank for that. Like my minor heart attack once a month.
Well, it does throw you off a little bit. So I got you. I remember being in Japan and like we would go get yen with American dollars, and you actually spend more money to get yen because of the exchange rate at the time. So because Japan, I don't know if you know this, they have the largest national debt of any nation, but all that debt is actually confined to companies within Japan. So they have a interest in keeping the yen strong because it affects how much money they make from their bonds or whatever debt they own from the government. So that's it's kind of a crazy story because even then, like the American dollar is weak for obvious economic reasons, but the yen was always worth more. So if I needed 50 yen, it cost me $60.
Yeah. That's all irrelevant. We're going to be spending Bitcoin in a few months anyway, so.
Well, until it crashes. So.
Right. Until all of it crashes.
The world's coming to an end. All right. So let's kind of go get here into the IWA. So who all do you manage in the IWAR?
In the IWAR, I have 4 wrestlers. My primary one is Fortune 500 Aaron McFleece and his partner Hostile Takeover in the IWL. And previously in the IWL, but now being moved to the BRL via the draft, are Strictly Business and Taking Care of Business, moving over there as a tag team / duo. Those are my only 4 wrestlers in the IWAR, and then I have a couple of guys in the UNL. That's pretty much it. I only run about 6 guys at the moment.
So who do you have in the UNL?
Well, that's a funny story. So I have a couple of guys in the UNL. I have Trumpets Troussard, who is basically a Cajun wrestler from New Orleans here in the States, and No Bollocks Brad Abbott, who is a European wrestler in the model of a Wade Barrett. Collectively, they're known as Trumpets and Crumpets, but I don't really enjoy writing them, so I'm in the middle of rebranding them, and I have no idea what that's going to turn into. So gotcha. I have them for the moment, but by the time this probably publishes, that won't be true anymore. So we'll see how that shakes out.
So how did you get the idea for Fortune? I mean, I remember when you came in to the NWL. So what kind of brought on? I mean, Fortune 500 Aaron McFleece is pretty dope. You kind of added all those other guys. So what was the idea when you were coming up with that?
Well, I've actually done some variation of the Aaron McFleece character for 15 or 20 years. They actually started him back in eFeds online, strictly trash talk based eFeds. So it's a character I've played before, and I got away from that because eFeds last about as long as Snow does. They come and they go and they fall apart, and I got out of that. So when I came back to the IWA in mid 2016, it was just a natural character. So I'd always enjoyed playing him in the past, and I just basically brought him along.
Gotcha. So what kind of brought you to the IWA? Had you ever played before? How did you find out and get to where you're at right now?
Yeah, so stop me if you've heard this before, but I played as a kid.
No way.
Yeah, I played as a kid, and I quit because I got to high school and I was more interested in drinking beer with my friends and chasing girls than I was playing with imaginary wrestlers, or at least I pretended to be because you didn't want to be that guy.
Right.
So I quit, and then 20 years later, some odd, I don't know what the exact math was, but it's been a while. I just was feeling nostalgic one day and started playing around on the internet. I was like, holy shit, this still exists, and ended up just doing it. I came back in June of last year, and I think I last played around 94, maybe 95. I might have made it into 95. So 21 year gap in there, and came back because I was looking for something creative to do. I was getting ready, my second child was getting ready to be born in November, so we're busy with getting nurseries prepared and things like that. I just needed something fun to do that I could do in off hours that I didn't necessarily need to interact with a bunch of people. So I was looking for some game to play, something to do that wasn't going to be a huge time commitment, but that I found, sort of creative. And I just thought back to the IWA and found it. Just went, yeah, I'm going to throw a few bucks at this. And, here we are a year later talking at midnight on Black Friday. But that's just, the weird cycle of things.
Yeah, man, I think you kind of do the same thing. I mean, I know that I kind of was like, it's still around, and then, oh, shit, it is. And so I think that the big thing, too, for a lot of people is in the past, the IWA was the IWA, but with the IWAR coming into the NWL, it kind of hooks you because there's a little bit more of a network, a little bit more of a community, and there's a lot of places to go creatively where some of the other feds, not saying bad about them, but you don't really, it is definitely lacking if you're looking for creative outlets. So,
well, yeah, I mean, I'll say bad things about it. So when I was, in the IWA previously, it seemed like there was a lot of trash talk in the feds. I mean, I remember my first league was called the Bad Attitude League back in 93 or 94, and we came in, and there was a whole bunch of rookies that they just threw together randomly at the time. That was back when they actually only had 4 feds back then. It was East, West, North, and South, and later on they brought in the 6 fed system. But I remember there was a wrestler in there named Disco Dan, who was horrible, right? He's like a jobber, and we didn't know any better at the time. So some guy comes in, he wins the league title because they do the first league titles based off of point spread. So whoever wins by the biggest point spread in a match becomes league champion. Well, 4 or 5 cycles go on, and we're all, beating up on Disco Dan, and all of a sudden you open the bulletin and he's league champion. Well, it turns out that it was Kevin Elrod the entire time. So he had created the best wrestler in the league and the worst wrestler in the league and paired them up to win the league title, and then just flipped the script on everybody because we're a whole bunch of dumbass rookies, right? He's just kicking the shit out of us. So, I mean, that he's been around forever. Good on him. Whatever. It's a game. But, there was a lot of trash talk back then, and that's the part I enjoyed. Now, if you go and look at it, and that seemed to me to be in pretty much any league you went in, there was at least, some activity and trash talk. Now we live in a world where they publish all the bulletins, so you can go look. It's a wasteland as far as I'm concerned, there are 6 real leagues in the game. It's the 4 in the IWAR, the UNL, and the LWL over in Jade. Everything else is more or less a wasteland. Like, there's no trash talk going on in there. So, to me, the IWAR and those other 2 leagues really comprise the only things that I consider like the IWA I really like. Like, those are the only places I would consider playing right now.
Well, that's good to hear because, I need you around. I need my rubber match. So it's good.
Eventually.
Well, anyway.
We do that once a year, Luke.
I'm so upset about it. But anyway, you just complained about how crappy you're doing, and they just come around and beat me up. I see how it is.
I was too. It had been a rough run.
You were rope-a-dope at me. I see.
Yeah, I was total sandbagging.
That's right. But yeah, man. So yeah, definitely the creative piece. You do a really good job. As a face, it's really important to have a good heel, and the way that you write Fortune, especially this latest round, very self-aware almost of what his game was in the feud with Neo, but it added a flavor to it. And I just, I would say that you definitely do a good job helping me creatively because it just gives me something to play off really well. But I really enjoy what you do, and I really liked what you did with Cara Business. That was a good deal. So you
Thank you.
continue, yeah, man, you continue to do a good job with that. And like I said, for me too, it's a creative outlet. So if I have someone to work off creatively, it makes life a lot easier for me than it is if I'm just trying. If I'm carrying the load, it's not necessarily as exciting. But you guys, Jake, and a lot of people, especially the IWL, seems to be pretty hot right now. So I'm glad to be there.
It's the place to be. Like the IWL is hopping. I mean, what was that bulletin a couple cycles ago? Like 70 pages or 40, 50 to 70 pages, and like most of that was trash talk. It was almost overwhelming.
Right.
There was so much, but I mean that's the place to be. Like in terms of the quality trash talk, I think it's the best league in the IWA right now.
Well, that's what the kids say. So
That's true.
but yeah, man. So when it comes to that sort of thing, what are you doing as far as wrestling? Who are some guys that you're following right now in the real wrestling world that you really enjoy?
A lot of the New Japan guys. So, Okada is the best wrestler in the world right now. So anytime he has a match, I'm tuning in. Like even if it's a, trios match to start the show on the sub card so they can let Omega and Juice Robinson have the main event. Like I'm watching Okada wrestle. Like the guy's the best in the world. So, I'll stop what I'm doing to go check him out. Before we got on this call, I was actually watching some of the tag tournament they've got going on over there now, which doesn't have him, but I follow everything he does. Pretty excited for Wrestle Kingdom, him versus Naito. Should be a great match. So him, I like the Bullet Club, so I particularly like Omega. His matches are phenomenal. So in New Japan, I check out those guys, and then WWE, The Miz. Like The Miz to me is must watch TV. Like whatever he does, opposite of those guys in New Japan, right? Like the Miz's matches are just okay. Like they're fine, but like that guy on a mic is gold. So I'm checking out anything he does as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Okada, like I kind of came in when he was his redemption, where he was fighting Tanahashi, where he had lost the title, and it's like this big deal. And I think they just do a good job of building him up. But it's just so much what New Japan does. So the big thing was him getting that wrist on Tanahashi and holding it, right? And the fact that as they both went down, they were exhausted. Tanahashi, he had tried to get out, but Okada still had that wrist, right? He still had that wrist, and he hit the Rainmaker and won the title back. And that's just really cool because you don't really get a lot of that in the WWE where you said that there's not a lot of story, but there was a lot of stuff there that they did to build him up and make him legit. And just that shot, like you knew that was important. That was something special. And even though it's Japanese and I don't speak Japanese whatsoever, just the way the crowd reacted to it, the way the announcers' voices changed, you could tell what that was and how awesome that was, right? And how, just the way that he beat him and the story behind that match and what they said it meant to Okada beat Tanahashi and who Tanahashi was to the company, I thought was really awesome. The last time I saw something that emotional was when I watched the AAA match where Dr. Wagner Jr. lost his mask. Like, even though there was no title involved and it was a crazy match, right? With Psycho Clown, that him losing his mask, how much that meant and how much everybody in the crowd, you could tell that it was such a big deal to them. And I think the old man goatee probably helped the situation, but just that they're speaking Spanish, no flipping idea what they're saying, but just the way they're talking and the post match, it was all really, really cool because it was, even though there was a huge language barrier, the story they were telling transcended that. And I think that they do a good job of that in New Japan as well.
So I mentioned that I'm relatively new to New Japan, so I started watching G1 this year, and the first couple of shows had English commentary, and then you get to around show 4, and they're like, "We're not doing English commentary again to the final." So I'm sitting there going, "I don't want to watch this. I don't understand what's going on." And Jake kept pushing me, just give it a try. And I'll be honest, when you listen to it with the Japanese commentary, and you're right, I don't understand a word of it other than, like, I know hedabuto. When I start going hedabuto for headbutt, that's about the only word I know. But, if you have a good surround sound system and you turn it up and you can hear the crowd, you can hear the announcers, and you don't fully understand what they're saying, but you can pick up on the passion and the storyline. Like, it creates this sort of like in your house show experience that you can't get when you have Booker T babbling and Corey
Right.
Graves like going on. Not that those guys are bad. I enjoy some of what they do, but like you kind of just can get lost in the match and not have to focus on the commentary, but it's still there in the background is like kind of giving you emotion, right? It's giving you a tone to the match without a narrative. It's actually an experience everyone should try. I think it's just listen to it without the commentary. It's like a in your house show experience, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm kind of biased Japanese because I lived in Japan, so Japanese is like really calming to me. I
Right.
don't know why that is, but I think the funny thing is so like the crowd in the United States is annoying, and they're like playing with beach balls and chanting "This is awesome" before anything has happened and all that BS. The crowd in Japan, like, they don't give you anything. Like, if your batch is
No.
boring, they're like, "Yeah, you did a kip up." Like, they don't care. But when it's a match and everybody is on the same wavelength, so when they're excited, you're excited because they
Yeah.
don't give anybody anything and you can feel it. So when I always try to watch an event, I'm not really smart in any way, but I'm a little, I don't watch a match the way I did when I was a little kid, right? I'm not buying, I'm trying to think about psychology, but at the same time, I look at it from as a fan perspective. If I'm into the match, if there's a near fall and I'm like, oh, like excited about it, that's a good match. Like, you've got me engaged in
Right.
what's going on. And New Japan never fails in doing that. And it's just the fact that they look tired as shit and they show that they're tired as shit because even in that like
Yeah.
AJ Styles Nakamura match, they look tired as shit. And there were times where, like Nakamura had to need AJ Styles like 4 times to put him down, right? But it was just the fact that they were there, those near falls that sometimes in the WWE are like, wow, they had a near fall. No
Yeah.
way. In New Japan, they just seem more because the guys look so exhausted about what they're
Yeah.
doing. So
Yeah. I don't fault the crowds as much as you do. I think they're reacting to what they're presenting.
right,
So when you're at a WWE show, they're telling you a story and you're part of the story, right? So the fans interject and become part of the story. They, have their "This is awesome" chants and they're dueling, and the post WrestleMania crowds are the worst at this. Like, they don't really pay attention to what's going on in the show, and they interject into the story. But that's what happens on a week to week basis. Whereas in Japan, they're being presented more of a sporting event, so
hmm
they're more like spectators of the sport. They're going to applaud a good play. They're going to applaud valiant effort. They want to see both competitors put on something, and their reaction is based on that. So I wonder if the product here in the States was different, if the crowd reaction wouldn't be different as well.
perhaps. I went to like the Raw show with my son, and you could tell who they were into. Like when Miz came out, Miz is good, good stuff. Elias of all people had an
Yeah.
awesome spot because he he obliterated Finn with a guitar, which is like the coolest prop ever because it blows up. But for whatever reason, one of the pieces sliced the side of Finn's head. Now, granted, it's not anything crazy deep, but when you get cut in the head, you bleed like a pig. So he hit him with this thing and knocked him out, and he's bleeding everywhere. And it was just the greatest thing ever. But it was because, of what they were doing. And necessarily wasn't the greatest match in the world, but the way that it looked. So I think, like you said, it's a show. It's a carny sideshow in the States. And it's always been
Right.
that way. In
Yeah.
Japan, it's always been presented as a sport. So I think you're right on that, where we have a different idea or viewing experience of what the show should be, and the Japanese have a different viewing experience of what they feel the show should be, and that's reflected in the
Yeah.
crowd.
Now, a month ago, my wife surprised me with tickets for my birthday. We went to a SmackDown house show. It just so happened that the night of my birthday, there was a SmackDown house show, 5 miles from our house or something like that. So we went to it. It's the first time I'd been to a WWE show since, oh God, 2003, 2002, something like that. It had been a while. And the house show experience versus the TV experience it's an entirely different ball game. Like, it's more fun, it's about the kids. Like I was sitting next to, like an 8-year-old kid who was at his first show, and like he was way into it, right? He was being your typical, American fan, if you will, cheering and booing and yelling and screaming. But it was just so fun to watch because it was real to him, right? Like, and that's amazing. So, I think the fans have the right to enjoy the show on whatever level they enjoy it on. And, you have to find your own way to appreciate it, I think.
Yeah, I think house shows are better. My son, we were there for 5 hours, and he's like, "Dad, I want to go." I'm like, we are going to watch this whole thing. He was into the main event. It was like Strowman, Smojo, Roman Reigns. So he was kind of into that. But like some of the filler, it was just like, I don't want to be here. We've been here for 5 hours. I think a lot of Americans, and I mean, this isn't true for a lot of things in the States, is like if you don't go to it live, you don't really have as much appreciation for it if you see it on TV. Going to it like a WWE show live, you can hear when someone does a drop kick on TV, it doesn't look like something. When it does a drop kick live, like that's loud, and you can hear the contact on it. And I think that's cool too. And just going to a live show and watching it, you kind of get a different perspective of it. And I think that's the big thing too is granted, Japanese people watch a lot of TV just like Americans do, but I think it's just going to something live and music too. If you don't go to a live, you don't listen to music live, you miss out on something because you don't feel it. So, I hadn't been, for instance, I went to a concert, and went to a lot of concerts when I was younger, hadn't been to one forever, went to it, and I just forgot how it feels, right? And I think that's the thing with the WWE live show is you can feel what's going on. Like, obviously, the sound, just the way that you respond to it is so much better. Like watching a guy do a 450 splash on TV, man, watching a guy do a 450 splash live, amazing, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that kind of thing. And I think that the problem that we have is with WWE is because wrestling's so limited, a lot of fans are never going to be able to go to a live event because it's not cheap to go to a WWE show, especially depending on where you're at. So I think that if you have a better appreciation for wrestling if you can see it live. Because, I mean, that's when I really fell in love with wrestling. Other than watching on videos, I went to like a Des Moines show at Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Des Moines when I was like 5. And I got to see like Bret Hart and Yokozuna in a cage match, and I could see Bret Hart. Like we had good seats for whatever reason. I could see Bret Hart. I could see Tonka, like those guys. And it just blew my mind. So it's just, it's really cool. And hopefully, as wrestling continues to increase with ROH and stuff like that, people get to see more of that.
So I have to tell you the story of my first wrestling show I ever went to. It was probably 93, 94. I was still in my first run in the IWA because my buddy that went with me was my stablemate in the IWA at the time. We had our own little stable. And my father took us to the show because I'm, 13, 14 years old. So he takes us to the show. It's over in, a town near us called Canton, Ohio, at the Civic Center. And the marquee said, WCW Wrestling. So we go to it, and keep in mind, this is, 94 or so. So it's pre-internet. You can't just go look up whatever you want to look up and verify that it's true. Let me use my big people words. Yeah, but you watched, like, WCW Live, you see the event centers and things like that where it's, these are the shows coming up. And I kept watching for weeks, and the show was never listed on there. But, it says WCW Wrestling, so it's got to be true. So we go to the show that night, and I'm expecting to see, Sting and Lex Luger and Ric Flair, and I think this was right after Hogan had come over. So, I don't think Hogan worked many house shows at the time. So we're excited to watch it, and we get in there, we get to our tickets, and like this isn't a WCW, right? And I look down at the flyer, and it says Windy City Wrestling out of Chicago, Illinois. You talk about disappointed. Like we were just set up to have a bad night. The entire audience was entirely bait and switched. But yeah, it was a good time. Like once you settled in and you enjoyed it, it's a good time because live wrestling can be a good time no matter the quality of the show.
Right.
Like if you just lose yourself in the experience and enjoy it for what it is. Like sometimes I think we're all too cynical. Like I love inside of TMS, like we have our own little chat, and Jake and I are always like busting Derek's chops and vice versa because he hates everything. Like Derek hates puppies. Like, so we're always laughing. It's like, just stop and enjoy it. Like, he hates Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega is the worst thing that ever happened. It's like, well, maybe it's not for you, but find the thing you enjoy. And, people like Roman Reigns, great, right? Find the thing you love and enjoy. And there's so much wrestling out there that there's a way for everybody to find something they enjoy.
So I got my son to boo Roman Reigns, and that was fun, booing Roman Reigns. I like Roman Reigns now. Like, I was super excited when he showed up at Survivor Series. Like, I don't
Right?
know why, just having the big dog there was super exciting to that. But I booed him. But after watching that match and booing the shit out of him, I realized I really like, he's really cool. Like, I really like him. Like, I hate him at this point, but man, I like his matches. Like, I'm invested in this match just to see Roman Reigns get beat up by Braun Strowman. I'm okay with that. But I never really understood it. And then I kind of saw it live and I was like, everybody's really into this. Even though they say they hate Roman Reigns, they don't really hate Roman Reigns. They just hate the crap that had been shoved down to him because he's been shoved down their throat. But really, he's
Yeah.
really compelling in the ring. He looks good, and his matches are exciting, and he looks cool. I mean, like, so it's weird how when you look at something from the outside and you kind of just do that, and then you go to the show, it's a different perspective, and you can kind of appreciate things that maybe you didn't have an appreciation for beforehand, and like, or just different workers that maybe don't get the spotlight. They have a different value when you're live than you do. Even like Kurt Hawkins, and it was R-Truth and Kurt Hawkins in the warm-up match right before they went live.
Right.
Kurt Hawkins is a good worker. Like, he went out in R-Truth. They had a good match. They were like crisp, and they were pretty rough. Like, they were tearing it up out there, and they got people really, really excited to watch the show. And I don't think that people understand that, wrestling is at its heart a show. And going to that show and watching all that, like that match, that first match, was people were really super excited about that fact. And they got everybody into the show. Like, they did their job. That was their job. Kurt Hawkins was there to lose to R-Truth. But damn it, if they didn't put on a good freaking match that everybody enjoyed, and that when it was over, everybody was happy, and nobody went home sad about that specific match. So like you said, you can be cynical and complain, but really just sit and enjoy it. It's fun.
Absolutely.
That's why you fell in love with it in the first place. So I 100% agree with you, because you can bitch and nitpick about anything. You can find a flaw in everything, but if you just look at it for what you enjoyed it for and why you came, they're putting on a product that you can enjoy. It's not impossible to enjoy it unless you choose to. So like I said, I don't know. I think that's just a societal thing. We're all really cynical about everything. So that probably is kind of indicative of where we're at as a society more than the wrestling. But so who do you follow? Who are some of your guys that you really enjoy in the IWAR right now?
Oh man, there's so many. So I'm going to just leave my TMS stablemates off the list. Obviously, I'm a fan of those guys, but I think probably my two favorites, the two that I think stand head and shoulders above the rest that really stand out to me, is one, Seth Brubaker is doing the best work in the IWL right now. He's so good at what he does, and even if he's working with himself with the Monroes versus the Chaotix, or an inter-Monroe feud, like, it's so compelling, and I'm reading everything he does. So, which I can't say for everybody, but anything Seth writes, I'm reading. And the other person in the IWA at Wide that I'm a big fan of is Andy Connick. Andy, I got a chance to, have a Koenig.
How do you not know that?
He's just Andy from here on in. I'm sorry, Andy. Sorry about that. So anyway,
superhero. All right, he's a Polish superhero.
He's a Polish superhero, yes. So Andy K, as we will refer to him from here on in, I had a chance to work with him in the LWL over in Jade, and I've since disavowed Jade and everything, and fuck it for all the stupid jadiness, and I hate it. I hate it so bad. But I'll probably go back someday. But I had a chance to work with him, and the depth he brings to his characters is so good, and he's kind of even inspired some of the writing I've done with Fortune lately in the feud with Neo, the more introspective, descriptive stuff. I once told Andy, I want to be him when I grow up in the IWA. So I really enjoy his work. But a lot of the guys, the IWL is just stacked top to bottom right now, present company included. It's such a great group. But, I think if I had to just keep it from two and not gush over everybody, it would be Seth and Andy.
Yeah, they definitely do a good, the Moreaus, the Chaotix, they're always good. They always have good feuds. I'm glad to see the Blanks are in there to beat up on the Moreaus, because those bastards are always winning. And Andy's always been good. I mean, when I was in the NWL, he was the shit. So, and that was back in like 2014. So he's always been good, always been a good writer. I was really excited when he took over the CWL way back in the day, before I had to kind of step back for a little while. But he's always been really good. He's always been, somebody that you could go to and ask questions to as well. And I think that's one of the big things about the IWAR is when you're new and you're kind of lost in the sauce, there's always somebody to reach out to that you can help. And as long as you listen to them, you're going to be successful. Even if you're not, you may not be the IWA champion in 2 cycles, but you're going to be successful enough that you're going to enjoy what you're doing, and you're going to have some creative, you're going to be creatively happy. And, the big thing about it is anything that you do nowadays, you got to have a little bit of a community to keep you engaged, right? And I think that's what the IWAR does with the IWAR page. The LWL does that as well, but I think the IWAR, with the rookies and stuff like that, if you're a rookie out there right now, you can pretty much reach out to most people on that page and, give or take a few. They're going to help you out, give you some ideas, or point you in the right direction to somebody. And especially as a new guy coming in, or somebody that's, like 99% of everybody that played 20 years ago and is coming back, there's a lot to take in, but you can always find somebody that's going to help you along, and everybody wants to see you be successful. And I think that's cool too.
Yeah, I would suggest that everybody do what I stumbled into, and that's find an IWA buddy. Like, find somebody who's even on your experience level, even if you're both new, and just learn the game together. So that's, I keep coming back to Jake, but that's kind of what we did. So when you come in, the game of the IWA is super simple. Like, we're basically playing bingo with imaginary wrestlers. Like, it's, the game's kind of ridiculous when you start to explain it out loud. There's a layer of complexity to it. So when you start watching like tube casts and you start watching drops, like, I'm a guy who programs computers for a living and I understand numbers, so I watched Matt thing on drops, and I had to watch that thing like 6 times before it dawned on me. So Jake and I started talking, and like, he had trouble grasping it, so we worked together on it. And that's actually, like, I don't know if we've ever told this story out loud, but that's how we came up with the name, the Midnight Society. So we're doing our little thing. We have our little Facebook chat where we're going, all right, what do you think the drop's going to be? Do you understand this? Like, what's going on over here? What's saying with this? What's Matt doing with this? And like, we're trying to explain it. We're bouncing ideas off of each other. And the reason we came up with the name the Midnight Society is because you come in and you see these guys in like Edge and Virus, and they're winning everything, and you think they know some magical secret that you don't know. So we found some guys who were in Virus and Edge, and we'd start talking to them, and we'd start trying to mine little secrets from them. And whenever we would get like a little tidbit of advice from one of them, we would take it and we would incorporate it. And our little joke was Viva la Midnight Society. Like, that was me and Jake. Like, we were covertly, like, socially engineering these guys for IWA secrets. We weren't. All right, here's a little secret, right? Those guys don't know a damn thing you don't know. They just do more of it. Like, they know nothing you don't know. They don't know a secret, but that's how we came up with the name the Midnight Society, because that was us just, goofing around, playing with it, and the name for some reason stuck. So we decided to go to a stable. Like, that's how we came up with the name. But I recommend you pair up with somebody who's in the same spot you are, because if you go and try to pair with myself, who's not a good teacher, or even or Matt, like, they understand it. It's so intuitive, and they've done it for years, or they've really got it. It's hard for them to explain it to somebody new. Whereas if you get somebody new with you who can just sit and bounce those ideas off of each other and just, make mistakes, man. Like, you're going to make mistakes, just learn from them. But, find somebody to do it, because if you have that friend, like, if I hadn't made friends with, you and Matt and Derek and Owen and Jake, I'd have bounced in and out of this game in like 4 cycles. Like, I'd have been back, won a couple of titles, lost a couple of titles, but like, well, I'm out. Nostalgia run done. But, find somebody, because you're going to stick with those people. Like, I wanted to go to the IWL because I wanted to play with people I knew. Right? So find a buddy and stick with them, and the game's a hell of a lot more fun that way.
100%. I mean, and you know what? Like, I'm not always the best with strategies, but you also have to realize that, it's a numbers game a lot of times in the IWA and the IWAR. Now, we're not like, we don't have as many wrestlers as some of these other guys do, but you have to think about it like this. If, there's 3 or 4 drops that could happen, if you have 2 people in the IWA, you're not going to hit every cycle. So,
No.
and these guys that have a lot of success, it's not necessarily because they're like mathematical geniuses. Even if you're like some people and a math teacher or a programmer, right?
Right.
You have everybody struggles. It's hard to always be on top, and Andy somehow always finds a way to be on top. But let's not talk about that. But there are guys that are always successful, like Kinderwatt. He's always killing it, right? But it's just you have to think that if you have one or two wrestlers in the the IWAR, wherever you're at, don't get frustrated when you're not winning every cycle. Like you said, you need to find some guys that you really enjoy playing with, talk to them, BS with them, do what you got to do, try to figure out the game, ask about drops. But at the end of the day, you need to try to have somebody you like and try to get in a good feud, man, because there's a lot of times where Neo Dragon will be sucking it up, but then I'll have a good feud going, and that kind of keeps me. And then I'll win a regional, or I'll win a pay-per-view, which I haven't been able to do for 2 cycles, but let's not talk about that. Especially if you're in the NWL and you're a rookie, man, you're going to build these things. So a lot of the people that I feud with, and a lot of it's people that I have met and that I've developed a outside the game relationship with, and then we go and feud and we're working together. But a lot of those guys from the NWL, like Luther Alexander, for one, I remember from when I first started, came back and feuded with him. We created a whole story about how he got Neo Dragon fired when he was injured and all this stuff, right? And now we have a little feud going, and we can always come back to that feud, right? Like that match at the Brawl in the Big House had nothing to do with anything. It was just we could put those two guys together and shit would happen, right? Or with Fortune, like we did that match, and and the funny thing is the gods that run the IWA somehow make things happen like they should. So that was my Neo Dragon's last match in the NWL, and I just happened to beat Fortune, who was like on fire, right? You're god moding the NWL up until that one match. I just happened to get it out of you, but what that did is it gave Neo Dragon a nice little swan song, and then created a rivalry for later on, and you just happen to come to the IWL. But that's just neat little stuff. So if you can keep those people, remember those people, develop those feuds in the NWL and anywhere you go. So if you go to the BRL or the CWL, but your buddy goes, to the CWL, well, bam, you guys have already some feud with, and sometimes it's nice to go into friendly territory because like TMS, like you guys knew, you went out, you found Neo Dragon, you beat the shit out of him. He's really good at getting the shit beat out of him. So, but it's just the fact that you kind of knew somebody going in there and you weren't completely lost, trying to figure out like who am I going to feud with, what direction can I take it, and there were a number of guys that you could have done that with. So it's just nice to have that sort of relationship, and don't be afraid again to reach out to guys. Like I'm kind of a dickhead as Neo Dragon, but I'm really not that big of a dickhead when I try not to be. So,
right.
Don't get put off by people, and don't associate a person's personality with their characters, right? Like it may be an extension of my personality, but it's my personality on like PCP. Like I'm not really the cartoon character individual that I have created, right? And neither is Juan, and neither are you, hopefully.
Yeah, the other thing I would tell the young players is, like, just dive in. Like, just dive in and go do something dumb. Like, you see these big name roster players, and it's a little intimidating. But then you watch, like, Ricky Kyle walk in and challenge Mark Duchesne and beat him. And great, right? Like, that's awesome. Is Ricky Kyle a better player than Mark Duchesne? Time will tell, but I'm going to go with no, because Mark Duchesne has, like, 3,000 world titles, right? So no offense to Ricky, I like Kyle Queen a lot. He's a very nice guy, and you ever get a chance to talk barbecue with him, he's phenomenal. But like the big roster players win because they fire more shots at the pot. 1-on-1, Kyle Queen has every chance to beat Mark Duchesne one wrestler to one wrestler. So go take a shot at somebody. Like, don't be afraid of them. Challenge their one wrestler. Try to beat their one wrestler. And if you lose, who gives a shit? It's imaginary wrestling, right? Like, so just dive in. There's no consequence if you lose, other than you might have to eat a little crow in your trash talk. Like, just dive in and do something dumb, and that's going to become part of your backstory. Like, just don't be afraid of these guys, right?
Right. And I think, too, you're building a narrative with the characters that you create. If your character wins all the time, that doesn't necessarily breed the best narrative. Now, granted, you don't want to go on like a WWE 50-50 or like a content like that doesn't, but you can bring things out of that. And also, I look at kind of the way that the IWA works, and it's more like college football. Like everybody has a chance to beat anybody one-on-one, like you said. Now, there are powerhouses they're winning consistently, but that doesn't mean that at any time some little guy can't come and beat them. So it takes one cycle. That's all that it takes. There have been plenty of people that have come out of nowhere to do great things, and it may not be a consistent thing, but there are also things you have to think about too. Like people in the IWAR especially, they value success in titles and things like that, but they also value success and your ability to talk. And you don't always, we get ourselves over to each other. And that's all that we have to do. If you can get yourself over through trash talk and you can mildly back it up with what you do strategy-wise, you'll be doing just fine, because people are doing this as a creative outlet, and it's a form of entertainment, and that's what you have to realize. So you want to try to be as successful as possible, but at the same time, you also don't want to get infatuated with that success, because, you can be a little bit downtrodden, and it can be really annoying and frustrating. But at the same time, next cycle you could get a 501. You don't know, because it's all about, there are certain things that go into that, but at the same time, if you can get some of the basic rules down, like just remember 25 and 90, that's pretty common ones, right? So if you can start getting some of those basics from some of the guys that have been around for a while, you're going to kind of start at a 500 kind of thing, and then you can kind of build on it from there. And it can be kind of a crapshoot. Like those back five aren't necessarily the easiest to predict. Sometimes 143 will go up, 143 and go down, and sometimes the world is cruel and both 43s hit, and then it screws everybody over. So
I liken it to playing poker. So in a previous lifetime, I played a ton of poker online. Like I was one of those guys who'd have like 12 tables open, and you're playing the odds and you're playing math. And the IWA is a lot like that. Like as long as you're doing the right things over and over, you're going to have some success, but you're going to have some failures, and it's just variance. Like Fortune did well this cycle and did okay, but I've been on like a horrible streak for the last 5 or 6 cycles. I just hadn't won anything. That doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong, and I think that's important for people to keep in mind. It's like that's just variance. Like if you do the right thing over and over again, and take your best shot at it, eventually it will pay off, because it's variance, right? If you have pocket aces and you play them against any hand, you win like 88% of the time. People go, well, that means I should win all the time. No, it means you should lose 12% of the time.
Right. So
that's going to happen. So just do the right thing over and over again, and then results will come. And if they don't, have fun telling a story, man. It's just, we're pretending to be people who pretend to beat people up. Like it's the most absurd thing in the world. So just have fun with it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with rookies is like you're going from a rookie league where you're having a lot of people new come in. So the guys at the top are really successful, but when they get out, that success may not be the same, just because you have to think about it. So in the IWL, the BRL, CWL, you can get like a 493 and still not win a title and still get beat a lot by a lot of guys if it's just one of those cycles where everybody kills it. So you're not playing the game the wrong way, and you're not doing bad. If you were in another league, you'd probably, you're going to win every single cycle. It's just the fact that you're not in a place where a lot of people have been playing the game for a long time. They understand how to get to the point where it's 1 or 2 holds here and there. They're going to take them over the top. And then you're dealing with things like point flow, which rookies probably shouldn't worry about until they get to a certain point where they're consistently good. So you have to understand that, you may not be as successful when you move on, but it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's just because maybe you're not where you need to be for consistent success. So you need to try to reach out to somebody to find a way to get to that 500 piece, and then you can play with the holds and you can gamble a little bit. But remember, if you have 5 guys, it's a lot easier to gamble than it is if you have 1 or 2. So Absolutely. If you're going to stick with 1 or 2, that's fine, but don't expect to be killing it every cycle, or you're going to beat yourself up and you're going to hate the game. Because you like you said, you don't have as many shots at the pot. You didn't put as much as many pieces on, if you're playing roulette and you put everything on black, if it's red, you've completely lost. So, but the more you divvy up those pieces, the better chance you have of winning. And it's just one of those things that you can't get. Now, they're wizards in this game, and they will win consistently, but they know it's a time thing. Matt Riley has been playing the game since, I was alive. So he has a different insight to things. He's been around for a while. He also has quite a few wrestlers. So it's one of those things where, consistent success can be elusive. Everybody has bad years. So you can have a year where you're not winning anything, and the next year you're killing it. And in the IWA, there is some power that be that selects the holds. It defies logic somehow, and they will switch things on you. So holds that were good last year won't be good this year, and they may be good for the first 3 months, but are awful for the next, 9 or whatever. And so it's hard sometimes to predict those things, and because you can look at it and say, this is the pattern. So this last one, you looked at, I've been keeping track of for a year and a half, and Steele did us no good by being 28-28 because that has literally not happened in the year and a half that I've been tracking holds. So I looked at it and I said, okay, this is what it's going to be, because based off this, there is no possible way they're going to rerun a drop that just happened 2 cycles ago, which they proceeded to do. Right. So it's just one of those things that you never really can know. So you can try to game the game as much as you want, but at the end of the day, you just have to try your best and hope for the best, because like you said, it's playing bingo. We don't really have any control over it. There's no real logic behind it. We don't know benevolent force that picks the holds, and we don't know who or what it is. That's that's a good thing. You and I, we kind of came up together in the NWL, though I was kind of there was a little bit of gap between us, and I had played a little bit more recently than you, but really, you need to find your peers and get locked in with them. And like you said, find a buddy that's kind of where you're at, starting with you, that you can grow together, and you're going to have more fun. And just get a group of guys together, and there's nobody's winning anything, despite what the dungeon may tell you. Senior Lucha wasn't given the world title because the IWA really likes Matt Riley. So it takes a while to get to that point. It took forever for Matt to win that IWA title with Senior Lucha. It took years. So, Matt Riley, I said, has been playing for a long time. He's a good example of a guy. He had got to that point with Senior Lucha, and he finally got it. It had been years and years and years, and close calls, things like that. So you just need to keep pushing it, keep working hard, and eventually, you may or may not get what you want. But the nice thing about the IWAR is you don't have, even if you're not a consistent title winner, you don't ever have to be a jobber. You can go out and have a good feud that people really enjoy, and you can find guys that'll push you to your limits that way, and that sometimes can be more fun than just doing straight holds, unless that's your gig. Some people really, really like the hold piece, and I don't. So that's just my personal preference. But yeah, man, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I really appreciate you coming on here, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
I know you got a young one that'll probably be up pretty soon, so have fun with that.
Well, if you want to talk at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll be awake. So
I will hopefully be asleep, because you're an hour ahead of me, so I don't want to be up at 5 on a Saturday. But that'd be pretty awful. So all right.